One of the things that someone asked me, we're going to go back to the whole Proton thing. One of the things someone
Okay.
asked me on Twitter was, why does ProtonGE need to be like its own separate thing? Like, obviously, you touched on this a bit, but why isn't everything that you're doing something that's suitable to be upstreamed?
Well, I think there's two purposes that it serves. One, immediately we'll go to the FFmpeg codec stuff.
Mhm,
There is simply just stuff in there that Valve can't ship.
mhm,
They have their own specific version of Proton that comes with Steam, with specific codecs that they can only ship in that version.
mhm.
They can't enable extra codecs for that. And they're trying to work with that. They've got their media recoder. It doesn't work for everything, but they're slowly but surely trying to put things through that.
Mhm.
But for those other games, they simply need currently they simply need those codecs from FFmpeg that Valve can't provide.
Right.
That is one major reason that a lot of people started using the Proton GE builds. Another one is the FSR patches.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, now we know GameScope has FSR built into it. You can use it that way, but some people don't like using GameScope because it occasionally introduces input lag. Maybe that's just one example, or maybe it doesn't fit their it doesn't work with their monitors correctly for whatever reason. There's another example, or it's not capturing their mouse for whatever desktop environment they're using. That's another example. For those reasons, they might want to use FSR directly in the game, or for newer games, that's fine. They have DLSS or XLSS or FSR built into the game. But for older games and people running on lower end hardware, they may still want to use FSR for that
Mhm.
benefit. And we've removed it twice now because we keep getting into this point where it's like a Proton update comes out for the year,
Mhm.
like the new yearly Proton comes out, and then we're like, well, crap, how are we going to rebase these? Because the original author of those, he put them out for Proton first as a PR
Mhm.
or a merge request, and then moved his work over to GameScope. So the Proton, those patches for Wine or Proton are no longer getting updates from him at all. We fully rely on like the community to help with those updates, and we've got, excuse me, like we've got a guy who thankfully has updated it for us these last 2 years. I'm super thankful for him. He knows who he is. Um, but yeah, those are just a few examples of what sets apart Proton GE from Proton Experimental.
Mhm.
And on top of that, having all those little quirky test patches that get specific games working here and there,
Mhm.
like they could put them in Proton Experimental, but then like everybody that's running Proton Experimental, even on the Steam Deck, they're gonna be like, "Hey, suddenly half my games broke because you
Right.
exploited this hack." You can't do that
Mhm.
on devices that you're selling to people. So you have to, it's nice to have some other venue or some other outlet where they can unofficially do that.
Mhm.
And I'm not, I am not saying, I'm not contracted by Valve. I don't work directly with them or anything like
Mhm.
that. I feel like it serves that purpose very well.
Mhm.
So
I think that's something very clear that needs to be said as well. I had a bunch of people like who got really confused about your relationship with Valve. Like they're asking it like about stuff that only Valve internally would know. It's like, is Steam ever gonna make it so you don't need to use X Wayland on Wayland to get games running? Like,
oh,
so explain.
guys,
Yeah.
I am an end user just like everybody else. I work for Red Hat, which is a
Mhm.
completely separate company. The stuff I do at Red Hat is completely separate from
Mhm.
any of my projects or anything that I do on a daily basis. Anything that happens with Red Hat stays with Red Hat. I don't mess with it. I don't discuss it. That's all on its own special
Right.
thing. The same thing goes for Valve.
Mhm.
I am just an end user. I don't have anything, no inside information, anything like that. Uh, the most I ever do is talk to the devs on a daily basis through Discord,
Mhm.
like I have been for many years, and that's it.
So
Like
you just have
we have
contacts
a
within Valve, and that's about as far as it goes.
That's about as far as it goes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and most of the time, if I have some kind of special patch or something, it's something that either has already been put out there for regular wine, or it's by another community member between that Proton Discord or my wine or my own Discord,
Mhm.
or it's something that one of the devs is like, oh, I've been working. This used to happen, doesn't happen a lot anymore. Most of the time nowadays, anything they're working on usually just goes straight through Proton Experimental.
Mhm.
But for example, through the Media Foundation stuff early on, we did a lot of that testing. I would go back and forth with Derek for the Media Foundation stuff.
Mhm.
Apart from that, most of it's just day to day me being an end user and trying to get the new out there as fast as I can.
Mhm. Mhm. How much time do you reckon you spend trying to get things just how much time do you spend working on G? Obviously, you have Navarre as well as like a separate thing, but just on G itself.
A lot less these days than I
Okay.
used to. I used to, man, I'd work on it every couple of days
Mhm.
and just constantly pulling stuff in, constantly rebasing stuff, and that was part of the reason that with Proton when Proton 7 came out, we rebased the entire thing
Mhm.
because we were originally doing it the same way that TKG does, which was take wine,
Mhm.
put the Proton patches on top of wine, put the staging patches on top of that, and then put our custom stuff on top of that.
Mhm.
But now we just rebase off of, well, we use Proton wine and then just rebase staging off of Proton wine, which is a lot easier because that way you'd only have to rebase the staging patches once a year.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like, I mean, occasionally you'll have a Proton change that comes in and you'll have to change maybe like one or two patches in staging. That happens. And I've got a list of customized versions of the staging patch. And then, when a new Proton version hits, that's when we have to go through and we'll have to do another rebase again. But again, we only have to do that once a year now, as opposed to every time a new Proton version drops and breaks something.
Okay. So wait, can you explain the how the Proton release cycle works from your side then? Because I wasn't aware of any of that stuff.
Okay, so typically what I do is
Mhm.
I'll release a Proton version maybe like every 2 weeks.
Right.
And the reason I do that is mainly just to keep up with Proton Experimental. If there's a new patch or like an emergency fix or something that fixes a game that isn't launching, for example, like Ratchet and Clank,
Mhm.
if well, that one I had a little bit of work that I needed to do, but it was working on Steam Deck out of the box. But there was here's an example for that. On the NVIDIA side, there is a workaround for the direct storage problem.
Mhm.
And they can't exactly put that in upstream because of some complications with it. But it's fine for me to use it in ProtonGE.
Mhm.
It allows NVIDIA users to play the game. So that was something that I want. Once it immediately came out, I was like, oh, we got to get this in ProtonGE so people on NVIDIA can play the game.
Mhm.
And being able to just get those things out on a as fast as I can basis is really nice. Don't get me wrong, Proton Experimental, they shovel their own stuff out as quick as they can. Sometimes a lot faster than I can.
Mhm.
But with those little like hacks and quirks and things, again, that's stuff that only I can do.
Sure.
So